There's a lot more finesse to transitions than just specifying a property and the duration. What I'll show you next is how you can make the transitions more lifelike with timing functions, and even how you can control the period before the animation kicks in. You can do this without any additional specifications. You can have transitions start out slow, speed up, and then slow them down a bit before finishing. We do this by controlling ease. We can modify how transitions are applied through the transition timing function property. There are 5 preset values available: ease, which is the default; linear, which will display the transition at a constant rate; ease in, which starts slowly and then speeds up; ease out, which starts quickly and then slows down; and then ease in out, which is a combination of ease in and ease out. It starts slow, it speeds up, and then it slows down again. In addition to that, we have cubic Bezier, which allows you to completely customize how the ease transition works. Let's look at how these are applied to a file. The file that I'll start off with is simply a file that just has the hover states on our buttons. I don't have any transitions applied to these at all. We'll begin by adding a little bit of additional CSS to the page. Here's the page that I'm going to start working on. I'm starting off with some CSS that's very similar to what I used in the last video. I'm going to add an additional property of display block to the links. This is going to allow them to display on their own lines. I'm also going to add margin all the way around of 2 ems just to spread them out a little bit. And let's go ahead and make them a uniform size. To do that, I'm going to add width and height values as well. So I'll add width of 120 pixels. I'm going to add height. And just like we were doing in the exercise about organizing your CSS, I think I had mentioned this, but I like to keep my width and height together. So even though these things are not going to follow our alphabetical organization of the rules, I do like to keep those together because it makes more sense to me. I'll go ahead and I'll keep these two together and place them above the margin setting. We'll text align center, and then I'm going to add a border radius. If we save and we look in the browser, you can see that my buttons look like this. I want to create a little more spacing between the tops. I'm going to make the line height the same as the overall height. This will ensure that the text is going to be vertically centered inside of my buttons. Alright, now we're ready to start working with the easing. What we're going to do on the link tags next is we're going to define some transition properties. First, we're going to specify the transition property that we want to change. In this case, we're going to specify all. This will allow us to make changes to all properties. So we don't have to specifically say that we want to do the background or the border. You can do that, but all is going to give us the flexibility to make changes to any property. And you'll see in this example, we're going to be affecting multiple properties. The next thing that I'm going to specify is I'm going to specify the transition duration. The duration is going to set the amount of time in which the transitions take place. As I mentioned before, that has to be specified as seconds. Now, the other attributes that we're going to apply are we're going to apply the transition timing function. The transition timing function lets you specify those timing functions that I had mentioned just moments ago: ease, linear, ease in, ease out, and ease in out. Ease is the default setting, but we'll go ahead and we'll just set it to ease right now, and I'll show you what this looks like once we change it, once it's all working. Finally, I'm going to specify the transition delay. The transition delay allows me to control how long until the transition actually occurs. So in this case, we'll use 1 second. Now, if I save the page and we refresh in the browser, when I hover over these, in 1 second it is going to apply the change that we've made. So the change that we've specified here is just background color. You can see that on hover I'm changing the background color. Well, we're going to change some additional properties, not just the background color. I'm going to add some additional properties to the hover state. In addition to what we've specified here, what we actually want to do is we want to move these buttons across the screen. So we're going to do that by applying the transform property. Transitions allow you to change the CSS properties over time. Transforms actually manipulate HTML objects like images or divs or whatever element you target, and they allow the elements to be rendered by CSS and be transformed in two-dimensional space. So transforms will always follow the same basic syntax as we've been using. We're going to use the keyword transform followed by a colon and then the function name with any parameters that we want to change in parentheses. If we check can I use and look for transform, you can see that here are the css3 transform support. Safari is still going to need us to use the Webkit vendor prefix, as is our ISO browsers. All the other modern browsers are supported except for Opera Mini. In this case though, I would recommend using the Webkit vendor prefix since not all of the current browsers fully support transform. So we'll add the vendor prefixes as we do this. It is worth noting that transform is one of the few properties in which IE9 will function with a vendor prefix. So the vendor prefix is -ms- and it is simply applied in the same way. But what I'll do in these lessons is I'm only going to be using the vendor prefixes on the most current browsers, and since there are several current browsers that still need the vendor prefix, I'll use the Webkit vendor prefix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify -webkit- and then we're going to use transform. Now the functions that you can pass on for transform are translate. Translate allows you to move objects around the screen, and I'll show you how that works in just a second. You can also use scaling. That's going to allow us to resize elements. We can also rotate objects, which will allow us to move objects around a specified center point. And finally, we can skew elements, and you can skew elements both horizontally or vertically. For this exercise, I'm going to just use the translate. So after I have my transform, I'm going to type translate, and then translate is always going to take some values that are going to be passed on. The values are going to be the X and Y values. So for instance, if I typed in here that I want to move these 600 pixels, it's going to move them 600 pixels horizontally. I'm going to put a comma and then I will put the value for the vertical offset. In this case, we don't want to vertically offset them, so we're just going to use 0 here. Now that I have this defined, I'm going to copy the rule and I'm going to end with the regular rule without the vendor prefix. I'll go ahead and save my page, and if we go into the browser and refresh, when I hover over, you can see that the elements are going to move across the screen. When I hover away, they go back. Now, because we added that delay of 1 second, it does take a little while for the elements to start. We're going to reduce the delay down to about ½ second so that we're not waiting quite as long. So I'll change this to 0.5, and if we go back in and refresh, now when we hover over, they begin to move a little bit quicker. Now, currently all of these are moving with the ease function, which is the default function. So once again, when we use the ease preset value, the object starts off slowly, gets faster, and then when we mouse away, it ends being slow as well. What we're going to do in this exercise is we're going to change these values so that we can compare the different ease functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the definition for the transition timing function. I'm going to cut this, and we'll leave the rest of these transition properties defined on the A tag. If you look down here in my HTML, you can see that each of my A tags has an ID assigned to it. The ID is placed there so that I can uniquely control the timing function for each of these buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to target these with their ID. So the first one is just called ease, and what we'll do is we'll paste in the transition timing function. We're going to have this first one be ease, and I should place in my vendor prefix. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some additional rules for the other elements that I have here. The next one I have is going to be linear. And just to make things a little quicker, I'm going to actually just copy this entire rule, and I'll change the selector, and then I'm going to change the timing function. Ease in is defined with a dash between ease and in. Ease out is also defined with the dash. For now, I'm going to leave the values blank on the cubic because we'll look at these first 5, and then I'll come back and show you how cubic works. I'm going to save my page, and we're going to go back into the browser, and let's look at how these easing functions affect the animation. I already showed you what the first one looks like. So when I hover, it appears like this. When we use linear, the movement will remain at the same speed the entire time, so it never ramps up or ramps down. It just continues to move at a linear speed. Ease in is going to start slowly and then get faster. When we ease out, it starts fast and then becomes slower. And ease in, ease out is going to start slowly and get faster, and then resolve and be slow as well. So you can see how these subtle differences affect the timing of the ease. Now the cubic Bezier is your opportunity to actually customize this movement. So when we use cubic Bezier, what we do is we're going to use the transition timing function. We're going to specify cubic Bezier, and then we pass on some parameters. The values that you can pass on into the cubic Bezier function are defined as points on a curve. If you're familiar with any vector applications, you probably have seen a Bezier curve. The Bezier curve is a method of applying points to actually create lines. So you'll find the curve model when you're drawing with the pen tool in Illustrator or other applications that have a pen tool. A line that appears like this is actually a curve that's formed with 4 points. These points have handles that actually are going to affect the shape of the curve or pull the curve in certain ways. So I would lay down the first point and I would drag a handle to this P1 point. And then I actually have another handle that is dragging down towards this direction. Then I would lay down my second point, and it's going to have handles that force the curve to be up and down. So a line that's made like this actually would have 4 points that would be plotted in order to make this particular curve. When we define points for our cubic Bezier curve, we can input in values from 0 to 1. And these numbers allow us to create this sort of curve. So I'm going to input in 0.95, comma, 0.05, comma, 0.75, comma, and 0.035. Then I'll close the parentheses. And of course I already have my closing semicolon. I'm just going to copy this in. Looks like I got a space there instead of my point. Alright, let's save this page and let's take a look inside of the browser. When I refresh my page and we look at this particular one, you can see how the button starts off very slowly and then speeds up very quickly and then ends up almost looks like it's keeping its same speed, and then it just kind of parks itself. So the rate at which this link is moving is very different from the other links that we have on our page. You can see how it has a very custom look, and that's a result of this Bezier curve. So you can see that this button works very differently from the other ones. We're able to create these custom speeds using the cubic Bezier function. You can see that the cubic Bezier function allows us to define these very highly sophisticated custom speeds, but it's not very intuitive. You probably are wondering how I decided on these numbers and how I got these particular numbers and how they would look as a curve. Well, luckily there are some tools that we can use to be able to visualize this and also to help us to understand how the cubic Bezier function actually works. If you visit the website cubic-bezier.com, you will end up on this particular page. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to, first of all, see how a curve would look. So the easing curve looks something like this, where it starts off and you can see that the curve is very slight. It ramps up and then it gets more severe down here. A linear curve just remains straight. Easing in only has the curve at the beginning and then it slowly ramps up. Easing out is the opposite of ease in, and you can see that an ease in, ease out kind of looks a little more like ease, but it's a little more severe of an S curve. So this at least gives you some visuals so that you can see what these would look like. What you can do with this is you can actually create your own types of curves here, which will allow you to create a very customized animation. And when you drag these things out, you can really control exactly what's going to happen on your page. So if we make a curve that looks like this, and then I can just copy paste these values right here, and we'll go back into our editor and we'll paste these in. And if I save and we go back to our page that we've been working on, you can now see that my cubic Bezier link works very differently from what we had before. So here it kind of rushes out and then it continues to kind of pause and then move again. So it goes pretty quickly, has a big pause, and then it moves again. So this is a much different type of movement than what we had before. You can also preview how your animation looks by clicking the little Go button, and you can see that it will actually preview what this looks like. You can adjust the duration and it'll update this for you. The bottom one is always going to allow you to compare to one of the default library items. So if I click linear, you can see that now when I compare, it's going to compare the animation to a linear animation. Here's my custom animation, the one that we just made. Utilizing this tool though, you can get an idea of how your animation is going to look compared to one of the default ease functions and then to your own custom ease function. So I do find this very helpful when you are trying to figure out what sort of numbers you should plug into your cubic Bezier function. Now before we wrap up this particular exercise on the transition types, I do want to show you a more condensed way of specifying the transition properties. You can see here I've outlined them all separately: transition property, transition duration, transition delay. Now if I was adding my vendor prefixes in addition to these, my page would get fairly long fairly fast. There is a way that you can specify all of these things at once, and I recommend that you learn the shorthand transition formula so that you can make your code appear a little bit more condensed. I'm just going to comment this out and I'm going to show you the shorthand method of writing this. So for shorthand, we're simply going to define transition, and then we're going to pass on all of the various properties. The first property that we'll pass on is going to be the transition property. Then I'm going to specify my transition duration. Then I would pass on the transition timing function, and then I would pass on the transition delay. So now I have all 4 properties defined. Now you can see if I left this as is, I'm actually adding the transition timing function, which we are defining down here on these particular IDs. We don't actually need the transition timing function. So I don't actually have to have that appear there. If you have all 4 values, you can plug them in, but you don't need all of those. And if it just shows the 3 values, it will just apply those. If it finds, oh, and I need an S right here. If it finds 2 duration values, the first one always applies to the transition duration and the second one always applies to the transition delay. There is not a specific order that you have to define these in, but I generally like to do transition property, transition duration, transition timing function, and then the delay. If I go ahead and define this like so and save the page, when we go back out to the browser and look at our page, there's going to be no difference from what we had before. Everything's going to function in the same exact manner as what we were using before. The only difference that we have here is that we're being more consolidated and condensed in our code, which of course is always a good thing. So using shorthand notation is definitely the way to go, especially when you find yourself having to define the vendor prefixes.